Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Industry Needs, the State of Construction. My name is Annie Garniva, and I'm the interim CEO of the New York City Employment and Training Coalition. Thank you to all of the members that have joined us this afternoon. We're excited to bring you this discussion with our fantastic set of panelists and to continue this great series that we've been doing for the past few months. Thank you again to Amazon, Google, LinkedIn, Meta, and Verizon for sponsoring this series. All participants should know that you'll be muted for the duration of the webinar. We will now hear from Valerie Payne, who is the Executive Director of Rebuilding Together NYC, and an NYCETC board member, and who will provide opening remarks. After that, we'll hear from James Parrott, the Director of Economic and Fiscal Policies at the Center of New York City Affairs at the New School, who will provide a labor update on the sector before we head into the panel discussion. Take it away, Valerie.
Thank you, Annie, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again to all the coalition members and partners for joining us this afternoon. Today, we have the pleasure of sitting down with leaders across the construction sector in New York City to discuss the state of the industry from their perspective and learn what we can do as providers to better engage with the sector, specifically how we can prepare workers to become employed and or reskilled and reemployed in construction and connected to careers in construction. Not coincidentally, the name of Rebuilding Together's pre-apprenticeship certificate program. The New York City Employment and Training Coalition supports the workforce development community to ensure that every New Yorker has access to the skills, training, and education needed to thrive in the local economy, and that every business is able to maintain a highly skilled workforce. The coalition's membership is composed of 200 workforce providers, educational institutions, and labor management organizations that provide job training and employment services to nearly 600,000 New Yorkers. Today, in this fourth installment in our Industry Needs series, we will discuss the state of the construction sector here in the city. Before we begin, I'd like to share a couple thoughts. Despite the setbacks of the pandemic, the construction sector remains a source of employment for thousands of New Yorkers from all backgrounds. It is an industry with low barriers to entry when it comes to educational background and or history of incarceration, making it one of very few that provides an opportunity for individuals to earn a middle income salary or a family sustaining wage, and also has opportunities for advancement. With an increasingly diverse workforce, this sector holds long established pre-apprenticeship programs as well as other training programs that continue to channel more New Yorkers from all communities into the sector. Not surprisingly, 45 of our 200 coalition members indicate that they offer construction-related certifications as one of their training and placement services. This makes it one of the top sectors our members train in. Today, we look forward to a lively discussion about the current state of the sector and to envisioning new paths as we move forward NYC's post-pandemic recovery and a much-needed recovery for all. Thanks again to everyone for joining today. We will now hear from James Parrott of the Center for New York City Affairs, housed at my alma mater, the New School, who will provide an economic update on the sector. Welcome, James, and nice to see you as always. Take it away.
Thank you, Valerie. Let me get my video turned back on. All right, good afternoon, everyone. As always, glad to be here and share my perspectives and research with you on the broader New York City labor market and economy. And today we're focusing on the construction trades. Lena is advancing the slide. So if we can go to the next one, Lena, that would be great. Thank you. Let me give you a quick idea of what I want to cover today. So I want to point out that the construction industry is, it's recovering. We just got some good news today. The March employment numbers came out. There was there's been a gain in 4,000 construction jobs over the past month. We're still behind where we were before the pandemic started, and we'll talk about how New York City's construction employment level is lagging the national recovery. We'll look briefly at the main spending trends that affect the construction sector. We'll look at the major occupations, pay levels, education and training requirements. We'll talk a little bit about the demographics and diversity in the construction jobs. And we want to focus on the importance of apprenticeships as a path into good middle-income paying jobs with benefits in the construction trades, and the importance of pre-apprenticeship programs in facilitating that entry. Next slide, please. So, these first couple of slides refer to the overall employment level in New York City. So we're lagging the national employment level by quite a bit. New York City was hit hard early on. Business restrictions were in place for a longer time in New York City. We are recovering, but we're lagging the recovery pace nationally. As of February, our employment level was down by 5.9% compared to the pre-pandemic employment levels. That's many times greater than the 1.4% decline at the national level. And the next slide, you can see that New York City, when you look at the 12 largest states in the nation, New York State is clearly lagging all of these other large states by a significant margin. And a handful of states, mainly in the South, North Carolina, Florida, and Texas, actually have employment levels now that are above where they were before. Next slide. This data is, as of February, it looks at the major industries in the economy. You can see construction as the first one under the face-to-face industries category. This is what I consider a set of industries that were hardest hit by the pandemic, that involve face-to-face activities, either because they're service-oriented and they deal directly with customers, or because they can't be done on a remote basis, like construction or manufacturing. Construction as of February was down about 25,000 jobs, with a slight upward revision in the February employment level, and this 4,000 gain in March that I spoke of. New York City's overall construction job level is now down about 20,000 compared to where it was in February of 2020. That's about a 13 or 14% lower level compared to before the pandemic. The construction trades, like a lot of the face-to-face industries, have recovered about 2/3 of the job losses in those first few months during the pandemic. Next slide. Here you can see the on a monthly basis employment level charted so in a way where both New York City and the US construction employment levels are pegged to the February 2020 pre-pandemic level. So that equals 1 on the chart. So you could see from this that New York City had a much steeper decline early on. Construction activity, non-essential construction activity, which was a lot of it, was shut down entirely for 10 or 11 weeks early on in the pandemic. That didn't happen, around the country in every locale. And as the recovery has gathered momentum nationally, the construction trades employment now is back to about where it was before the pandemic. Construction in New York City, as many of the big projects that were underway before the pandemic completed, the employment levels have continued to decline, although, as we've noted, they've started to pick up a little bit in the first few months of 2022, but we're still down, about 13 or 14% compared to before the pandemic. Next slide. And this just gives, looks over a longer time horizon. I think this is interesting because it shows in the decade before the pandemic that construction employment was actually doing better relative to the national level than certainly what it is now. You can see that New York City's construction activity was not nearly as hard hit when the housing bubble and the Great Recession occurred, the housing bubble burst, a lot of construction employment really plummeted many markets around the country, but it held up better in New York City. And then we had a pretty steady construction boom for many years, and basically in the decade up to the beginning of COVID. And then we see the sharp decline since then. Next slide. So this chart looks at the three major spending streams which determine the overall level of construction activity in New York City. And that's divided into government-funded projects. So this includes infrastructure projects, but it also includes government building. And there's quite a bit of that between education building, schools, parks spending, and the public hospital system and so on. Then there's non-residential in the middle tier here, and residential construction at the top. So you could see there was a pretty sharp, because of the pandemic slowdown and the effect on the construction activity, a 20% decline in construction spending in 2020. It did come back. The overall aggregate spending level came back in 2021, even though employment didn't come back entirely. And the projection is that the overall construction spending level in New York City will hold up pretty well in the years ahead. These figures are not adjusted for inflation. So if you factored that in, particularly with the inflation we're seeing now, you would see some real decline in construction activity. And that helps account for the fact that the employment level has not bounced back completely at this point. But you can see that each of these broad segments are really critical in the New York City market. The residential side, non-residential or commercial, obviously a lot of that is office buildings. That's a sector that's a little bit, hard to predict at this point because of the uncertain return to midtown offices in New York City. One part of this market that has been growing a lot, and the outlook is pretty positive for, is construction and infrastructure. And the next slide actually, looks at the New York City. All right, so this is a summary slide, and then we'll get to the New York City capital spending slide. So I mentioned that construction was halted entirely for 11 weeks. Residential construction peaked in 2019 in the wake of strong population growth in the previous decade. We have seen some out-migration during COVID. A lot of that is coming back. We're not sure all of it is going to come back. That will help affect what the near-term outlook for further residential construction is. As I noted, non-residential construction rebounded in 2021, and the outlook is for further growth despite higher office vacancies and the prospect of hybrid work. One of the areas where there's been a lot of construction activity in the last couple of years is in the construction of warehouses in New York City, which is part of the acceleration in the e-commerce trend. Certainly, several large warehouse facilities constructed for Amazon and other companies in the outer boroughs. So a lot of that activity I'd see in my borough of Brooklyn, the Red Hook area. There are lots of warehouses going up there at Staten Island as well. And as I noted, a strong uptick in government construction activity, 50% greater this year than 5 years ago. And that's without even factoring in the federal infrastructure spending. Those projects are not yet included because they haven't been, definitively, the funding hasn't been definitively lined up. And the next slide, you'll see the growth in the city's capital budget spending commitments for capital projects. Again, these figures are not adjusted for inflation either, but pretty steady growth in 2022 and the years ahead. So again, this covers bridges, schools, public hospitals, corrections facilities, parks, and so on. Next slide. So this shows the leading occupations. This is from the State Labor Department's Occupational Employment Statistics Program. It shows in the first column shows the employment level in New York City as of 2018. The projected growth, this is pre-pandemic projected growth, but the relative growth rates, among these occupations still pretty much holds. It shows the median annual salary level, entry level, which is roughly the average of the lower paid third of workers in that occupation. Experienced salaries, which is the average for the best paid third of workers. It shows the typical education needed and typical on-the-job training needed, and so on. So there's a lot to talk about here. So you can see, number one, the leading construction occupations, laborers, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, and so on. Then you get to first line supervisors and then painters and so on. You can see the relative growth rates and, pretty reasonable growth over the next decade with, higher than average growth projected for plumbers and pipe fitters. And, some of that is driven by green construction activity, which I'll come back and talk a little bit further about later, and the need to improve the energy efficiency of New York City buildings, of which we have a lot, as we're certainly aware. And part of that is pressured by local law 97 requiring buildings to improve their energy efficiency and reduce their carbon footprint. So that involves a lot of changes in HVAC systems and so on. Also, a large increase in hazardous materials removal work, and also helpers for plumbers and pipe layers and so on. Generally, you can see for the education needed that people don't construction for the construction trades, they don't require a college education. It is a great entry-level position. There is significant on-the-job training here, and apprenticeship programs are in that category. These are multi-year apprenticeship programs that involve a combination of classroom training, but a lot of supervised on-the-job activity as well, where the pay is pretty good and it rises. We'll see the progression for apprenticeship pay as a person proceeds through the apprenticeship program, and then it show the much higher pay level once the apprenticeship has been completed. The final column here shows the most common education attainment level for people who hold these construction occupations, and you can see that it's generally just a high school diploma, but then supplemented by apprenticeship, which in the way we count education attainment, apprenticeship is not included there, but it certainly represents a significant acquisition of skills and on-the-job education that's really important. Next slide. So one of the interesting things that I wanted to share, my presentation will be followed by a really expert set of panelists from the construction trades. So I'm curious what they have to say about this trend that stands out to me. There's a pretty significant increase in the non-trade share of occupations in New York City construction employment over the last 10 years. So the non-trade share has gone from about 23% to 33%. So by trades, we're talking about the construction workers on the job site who have manual skills. Non-trades occupations include the managers and engineers and cost estimators and other office-based workers. So this portion of the overall construction industry has been rising. So that has meant a declining share of carpenters, electricians, brick masons, and an increasing share of managers, engineers, but also truck drivers and laborers, two of the trades categories, but could be related to the increased use of off-site prefabricated construction components and materials. I haven't researched this trend, in a detailed fashion, so it's not clear to me if this trend toward the increasing non-trade share of occupations is due to change in technology or construction methods, or it might also be a function of the increasing share of government construction projects in this. Next slide. So taking a quick look at the demographics of in the construction sector, 8% of the jobs are held by women, 92% by men. Not that many young workers, although keep in mind that 6% looks small because that's only like a 6-year age segment, whereas these others are longer periods of time. 71% of the workforce is workers of color. In terms of education level, 2/3 have just a high school education or less, only 14%. And this is all people who work in construction. So this is not necessarily just the construction trades. Only 14% have a 4-year college degree. And a lot of immigrants work in this sector. This has been steadily rising over the years and is now about 2/3. Next slide. There's substantial, as we could just see, there's substantial diversity in the construction trades. The Malloy Initiative for Construction Skills has been around for, I think, 20 years or so, and has been channeling young adults from inner city neighborhoods into pre-apprenticeship programs that provide direct entry access into union apprenticeship programs. This program has a really high retention rate of over 80%. And as of a couple of years ago, when I located these numbers, they had placed at that point 2,200 city residents into apprenticeship programs. 2/3 of the people in apprenticeship programs in New York City are workers of color. A 2017 report from the Economic Policy Institute found that Black workers are more represented in the union construction side than in non-union construction, although the reverse was true for Latinx workers. 31% held union construction jobs compared to 49% of non-union construction jobs. But for both categories of workers, a significant union wage advantage, 36% for Black workers, 53% for Latinx workers. Next slide. Union construction jobs, provide a high paying, they're high paying with good benefits. Even non-union jobs in construction often pay more than other blue collar jobs in New York City. Union apprenticeship programs in the building trades, which also offer benefits, are the gold standard for career pathways for workers without a college degree. I mean, this is, I think, this sounds like a blanket statement, and it is. I think it's fairly accurate as far as I can tell. When you look across the landscape, what are the best opportunities for workers without a college degree in New York City? And I think that's the construction industry, and the skills that can be acquired through an apprenticeship program. And oftentimes to get into those apprenticeship programs, participation in pre-apprenticeship programs are really important. And I know several of the Employment and Training Coalition member organizations are very active in this field. Next slide. So here's what the pay progression looks like. And I picked two examples here, carpenters and plumbers. You can see what the hourly wage is for each year, and then the supplemental benefit, which is pretty significant in both cases, and really significant for the carpenters. So you can see, the wages go from for a carpenter, $19.55 in the first year to $22.55 in the second year, and continue rising to the point where a journey person, so that is someone who has completed the full apprenticeship program, earns the union scale of $54.75. And you can see a similar thing on the plumber side. And you can also see how the benefit allocations rise over time. The combination of these fairly reasonable strong wage levels and benefits really do translate into a middle class living standard, even in high cost New York City. Next slide. Just to note, the importance of the significance that local and state laws have in affecting safety and labor standards protections in the construction trades. I cite three examples here. In 2010, there was something passed called the Construction Industry Fair Play Act. This was in response to the practice on the part of some, but certainly not all, construction contractors, because of the high payroll costs associated with workers' compensation and unemployment insurance. There's a practice of misclassifying workers as independent contractors, grew in the years leading up to 2010. And since then, it really has brought down the incidence of misclassification in the construction trades. Although it's still a significant factor, it's not nearly the scale that it was before. Construction, there's no way to sugarcoat this. It's a high risk occupation, and safety training is really essential. In the years of the construction boom before the pandemic, the average number of fatalities on construction job sites in New York City, averaged between 20 and 30 a year for several years. It was only 13, fortunately, in 2020. It came down quite a bit. We don't have data more recently than that. A 2017 city law requires construction workers on construction sites in New York City to have 40 hours of safety training. And a law that just took effect this year to combat wage theft and to help better enforce against contractors on websites, on construction sites that aren't paying their workers what their workers are owed. This extends liability for those wages to the prime contractor and not just the subcontractor. And the next slide. So I just wanted to point out that we're all expecting to see a pretty significant growth in the green economy in coming years, and that translates into a lot of construction jobs. A 2013 BLS study estimated that 10% of construction jobs involved green job activities, and 20% of all green jobs were in the construction area. I mentioned this local law 97 requiring buildings to reduce carbon emissions. This entails significant plans to spend in this area, and this will have a pretty pronounced employment impact on its own. And of course, the federal infrastructure bill, which has been passed, will fund many construction jobs in New York City in the area related to climate change investments. So just to wrap up, my final slide, construction employment is currently, today's numbers indicate that it's come down to 13 to 14% below pre-pandemic level. It appears headed for a rebound, increased demand for green jobs as part of that. And we've talked about the importance of apprenticeships in providing the skills training to enable workers to access this, promising outlook for pay and benefits in the construction trades and a path into the middle class. That wraps up my presentation. I'll turn it back to Annie, I think. Thank you.
Thanks so much, James. Super thorough presentation as always. And of course, like we said in the chat, we're going to share the presentation with all the attendees, as well as the recording itself on YouTube. So now I would love to introduce our incredible panel. Joining us today are our moderator, David Meade, who's the Executive Director of Building Skills New York, as well as a NYCETC board member. We also have Desiree Ashmun, who's the National Recruitment Manager at Swinerton. Hi, Desiree. Justice Favor, the Market Development Representative at Laborers Local 79. And Erik Tinkhauser, who is a project executive at Lendlease. Thank you all for joining us. And now I'll hand it off to you, David.
Annie, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks to you and your team, particularly MJ and Stephanie, for all the work you guys did to put this panel together today. It was a lot of moving parts, and I know we all really appreciate it. As Annie mentioned, my name's Dave Meade. I'm the Director of Building Skills New York. I've also been a member of the Employment Training Coalition for almost close to 5 years now. Our organization, we connect individuals, train individuals on construction, put them on job sites all over the city. So I'm extremely excited to be moderating this panel today and talking with some very thoughtful, very smart people that really have, I think, a unique perspective on the construction industry. So, as we talked about, joining us today is going to be Desiree, Justice, Erik. And I think what we'll do is, just to kick us off, do a quick intro with all three. We'll start with Desiree, and we'll keep it to a couple of minutes each because we want to jump right into the discussion points. But yeah, Desiree, if you could just kind of introduce yourself, organization, and basically your role in the construction industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. We're so excited to be here today. My name is Desiree Ashmun. I am the National Recruitment Manager with Swinerton. And a little bit about our company. Swinerton is a national self-performing general contractor with 19 offices from coast to coast and growing. And we've been in business since 1888, and we started self-performing in 2014. And what self-perform means is that we hire employees directly to complete various trades on our projects. Depending on the project and the location, we may self-perform carpentry, drywall, labor, concrete, demolition, specialties, and potentially others. So our newest office location is New York City, which we officially opened last year. So we are really excited about that. It is being led by our division manager, Andrew Pearl. And once again, we're just really excited to continue to grow within the market and make a difference within the communities. My personal background within construction is that I was raised in the industry, and I had the privilege to learn a trade as a teenager. And I've been professionally in construction industry for over about 15 years, specifically within the talent acquisition space.
That's great. Thanks so much. I'll turn it over to Erik, who's a project executive over at Lendlease. Looks like Erik might be having some issues with your, yeah, try to unmute. why don't we do this? We'll have the team kind of, work it out on your side. But yeah, in the meantime, like, let's get it right over to Justice, who could, I think, could provide an intro on, his great work he's doing over with the laborers Local 79.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. My name is Justice Favor. I'm a market development representative at Laborers Local 79. We represent over 10,000 men and women in New York City. We are, proud, hardworking men and women. 10,000 members. We pride ourselves with being the most diverse building trade union. A large portion of our membership, close to 80%, reside in New York City. A little bit about myself. My role in working with my union is to increase our market share, break down a lot of barriers, educate the non-union workforce, whether that's recruitment, organizing, building bridges that typically haven't been built before, repairing relationships, and just continuing to increase our market share and effectuating change in the construction industry, being a vanguard in the industry and protecting the exploited workers, people that is often overlooked. And we just on the ground with it and just happy to be here, guys.
Thanks, Justice. Thanks so much. And Erik, I don't know if you're back yet. We'll keep working on it. If you're not, little technical difficulties, but the team will let me know if we're back on yet or.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we go. Cool. All right.
There you go. All right. So I had to remove my headphones. Sorry about the technical difficulties. My name is Erik Tinkhauser. I'm a project executive with Lendlease. Lendlease is a corporation that's based in Sydney, Australia. We currently operate in 7 countries across the globe, have about 10,000 workers. Unlike Desiree, we are a straight construction manager, so we do not self-perform any of the activities that Desiree's company participates in. As a construction manager, we hire independent subcontractors to perform all the work, and what we provide is supervision and project management, estimating pre-construction services across the construction industry. Currently in New York, we have about 40 active sites, which employ about 4,200 workers on a daily basis. My position here is running the integrated model, which is both projects that we both own and develop on our own account and build on our own account. I've been in the industry for about 30 years, run the gamut from institutional work, commercial work, and residential work.
Great. Thanks so much, Erik. So it was a really great presentation from James. He always provides a lot of really good data points. It was great to see some of the information about the construction sector. He gave kind of a thorough, presentation of the effects the pandemic has had on the construction and overall economic landscape. But I'm curious to get each of your takes on some of the impacts the pandemic has had from really 2020 on. First, Justice, just a couple of things. How are you recruiting your entry-level workers into construction, Local 79? How does that usually happen? Have you noticed shifted at all due to the pandemic, or just even in general over the past few years? And I think the final thing I would say, how is 79 supported and obviously advocated for workers during the pandemic?
Yes, great question. We continued our organizing front throughout the pandemic. There were a lot of non-union workers that, obviously was put in harm's way, that didn't have any protections, that was still, as we're still slated to actually go out to work. So 79 continued our organizing front and continued to protect our, our jurisdictional work, and was an outlet for workers that needed some assistance, whether we provided PPE for workers that didn't have anything, assisted them in education. That was what we was doing externally. Internally, there was a shift. Obviously, a lot of our members had to be vaccinated. Our employers were requiring that. Our clients were requiring that. So we just educated our members with, we're essential workers, and we still continued to work during the pandemic. And there was an element of, construction workers being left out of that, but we were still essential because we still didn't shut down. Obviously, there were, some decline in some work. Some work had to stop, but we continued to stay proactive. We continued to educate our members about the importance of being vaccinated and the importance of staying proactive with our health and safety protocols. So we just had to evolve with what what was a new invisible, enemy that we had to fight. And, Local 79 has continued and will continue to be vigilant, in terms of however the industry go in terms of, this outbreak and the continuous outbreak that's happening, which is unforeseen for us. So it's been a challenge, obviously, the uncertainty for some of our members and just the community that we worked at, adjusting to the new work rules that were happening on the construction site and getting folks acclimated with that whole new process. So, but I think that we moved along swiftly, and I think we did a great job with that.
Thanks for that. Thanks for all the efforts during the pandemic. And Erik, I think from a, obviously slightly different perspective, like you said, as a developer, a construction manager, and you guys are on, so many projects in New York City. I don't know if you've seen, kind of a high level overall trends as a result of the pandemic. And, tied to that also, if, you have any kind of general sense of some of the hiring practices with, construction companies or subcontractors that you guys bring onto your projects over the past few years. I know when we did the prep yesterday, you'd mentioned some of the prefabrication. So I thought that might be interesting to highlight.
Yeah, thank you. There has been, so traditionally in New York, it was a union town. And over the last 10 years, that trend has really trended more to the open shop, where we have union contractors and non-union contractors on the same project. In addition to that, there's been a lot of off-site prefabrication. James touched upon that a little bit. We've seen that across the board, from mechanical trades, electrical trades, where all the guts of the apartments are being prefabricated off-site and then being brought over in a palletized way and then kind of put into place into the framing that exists. Sheetrock, a lot of the specialty corners and things like that are being fabricated off-site, which leads to a little bit quicker sheetrocking process and taping process. Sprinkler fittings, a lot of that is being done off-site also. So there's been a tremendous move to offload a lot of the activities that would normally take place on a construction site to be off-site. And that's been an interesting trend, which really kind of leads to the other thing that James was talking about, is the decrease in the number of workers versus the non-trade increase of supervisors. So that I would agree with that 100%.
Got it. And Desiree, too, just this is what I love about this panel, is you guys all have a different perspective. I think, your company is worker owned. I was just curious how, but two things: how you traditionally have done sourcing or recruited for individuals for the company. And again, like everybody, if that's needed to shift, or you've seen some general trends as a result of the pandemic and doing that work.
Yeah, I definitely think there has been a shift. We've experienced a variety of different degrees of effects from the COVID-19 pandemic, just depending on being national, state and local levels. Obviously, that has a trickle-down effect. So those direct impacts have ranged from slowdown of available goods, labor, and we know that there's some short-term and long-term challenges that, as an industry, we're just going to continue to face. But finding skilled talent in the construction industry, it was challenging pre-pandemic. It's been hard during the pandemic, and we don't really foresee that as getting any better. It's going to continue to be difficult post-pandemic. So just some things that we've done here at Swinerton is, first, we really focus on retaining talent by providing more of a growth and development opportunities at all levels. So whether that's an apprentice, journeyman, or foreman, we've really developed intentional training programs, which some incorporates curriculum from our partner, which is NCCR, the National Center for Construction Education and Research, which is a nonprofit education foundation, while others are developed internally for our talent. It's really key for us that as we navigate these waters for our employees and potential employees, to know that they can have a long and successful career in construction, not merely view it as a job or a one-time project. And another aspect for us too is, depending on the locations, we've really made a strong push and emphasis on talent mobility. So if we potentially are considering laying off because of circumstances in one one area and we're needing to hire in another area, we've had that flexibility to offer our employees either travel assignments or relocation based on their circumstances. So those are definitely some shifts and some developments that we've had on our hiring and talent side. And we've also had to really seen some increased outreach efforts on the rise, not waiting for the talent to come in, rather going out to the communities and really finding the talent and leveraging technology to simplify that process. We have such a variety of occupations, and we recognize that our hiring practice within skilled trades and our craft population is a little different. And so we wanted to break that mold and think differently to customize that craft employee experience. And we did so by intentionally developing a craft services team, which is dedicated to this focus of hiring and retaining our craft population.
It's great. It's great. And, I think as we kind of jump into defining the sector of construction, getting your takes on this, many in the audience today, Valerie had mentioned this in her intro remarks, are members of the New York City Employment Training Coalition, are workforce development organizations. They're helping individuals, oftentimes entry-level individuals, prepare for different sectors, construction being one of the big fields. It really runs the gamut. I mean, there's organizations here that run pre-apprenticeship programs, job placements, there's community colleges that do training, and there's a whole host of job readiness and skills training programs that are members of the coalition that I know are in the audience today. So Erik, I'll start with you on this one. I definitely want to aim these questions at everybody. I think it's probably helpful for the audience to hear, what are some entry points you see into the sector? How can these organizations maybe best connect with the construction industry in general? And the final thing, what are some of the most in-demand trades and roles within those trades that you've been seeing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. And again, it's with Desiree's approach, we have a totally different approach because, again, we're construction managers. So we don't hire skilled laborers directly. The only labor that we have is our Local 79 labor. So on that side, Local 79 has a nice program for apprenticeships. Justin's is gonna talk about that in a little bit. As far as the trades go, what we do is we try to encourage minority participation and local participation and women participation in their workforce. These are demands. These are not demands that are placed lightly on the trades. This is an ask. This is a heavy ask for us. As every trade comes in the bidding process, we ask them about, what their apprentice programs are like. How do they get local talent into their organizations, minority participation and women participation, and then we track that. We set goals for them, and then we track that through the whole process. We do also encourage our trades to reach out to these various employment training programs. Hopefully these are local so that the local workforce can actually benefit from our projects. As far as what's in demand, it's the mechanical trades that are in very high demand. The other trades, we haven't found a problem with populating some of the lower skilled sets of the trades, so carpentry and concrete workers. We've never had a problem with workforce, but there is definitely a pressure on the higher skill sets, the mechanical trades, the electrical trades, and the plumbing trades.
Yeah, and are you finding too, with those middle skills but advanced skills there's an aging workforce that is factored in some of this too, and there is that need for?
Yes, on the mechanical side, absolutely, definitely an aging work set. Not so much on the carpentry and the concrete trades.
Right, and Desiree, just curious to get your take too. Is you guys obviously have a New York City presence, but you have a national presence, and the company's been around a long time. But for you and the company's perspective, entry points into the sector, how groups can best connect to get into construction. Again, what are some of the most in-demand trades roles that you're seeing?
Yeah, I was interesting when I was reviewing some of the questions that you had here, David. I think the word that stood out to me the most there was skill. right? So I think that across the board, any skilled trades as a whole are in demand. When you get to some more of the technicals, there are obviously state and local requirements for some of those that require additional training. So those may be even more so in demand. But as a whole, I think skilled construction trades, men and women, are in a demand from a national perspective. And when you think about working with the workforce development providers and on how we can refine and collaborate together, I think being a voice within the community to advocate the need for skilled trades and educating them on basic construction disciplines is always a great place to start. And then understanding that each trade is uniquely different. And some require, like I had mentioned, some of the different training and certifications, which are outlined by state and a county or city regulations. So working with established programs will really bring unity to the workforce.
Right. And Justice, how about you? Just the entry points, how to best connect, again, for the audience here today. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a plethora of ways that individuals could connect with the laborers. So I myself is a product of the apprenticeship program. We're recruiting 2 to 3 times a year. We partner with various pre-apprenticeship programs. Some notable is a Pathway to Apprenticeships. The acronym is P2A. We partner with Construction Skills, partner with Rebuilding Together, new non-traditional employment for women, construction skills as well, if I've said that. So that's one of the avenues individuals can actually enter our union, Local 79. Also, we partner with various community organizations when we have projects in the community. NYCETC, we have a relationship with NYCETC where we allow our NYCETC residents that come through their pre-apprenticeship program that's partnered with us, which is REIS, or their NYCETC resident. So there's many ways, and then our general recruitment that we have, that if you don't have any relationship or connection to any of those pre-apprenticeship programs, you could still enter our apprenticeship program. We're recruiting now, and I believe we're at our apprenticeships are for women is 14%, and we're about and then 80% are people of color, New York City graduates as well. And we all skilled. All workers have skill to their work, right? You have to take pride in that. There's an art to anything that you do. So I know that we use that term loosely. Some folks do. I personally take umbrage to that, but there's skill in everything that folks, every type of work, right? There's an art to that.
Right. Yeah, I was interesting. Desiree, picking up on you'd mentioned the NCCR curriculum. That you guys utilize that. I know that's a nationally accredited construction training curriculum. So you guys use that to help with training in-house. And it's actually a curriculum we've used with some of our community college partners too. And I like that there's an industry standard there and it's vetted. And I know we have other great partners on the call today, like Rebuilding Together uses another industry standard, HBI, a lot of other groups too as well. So I think to that end, maybe you spoke to it a little bit, but speaking to NCCR, and I think from like a higher level too, what are some of the ways that, again, the audience today, the workforce development providers can work with employers, kind of build and adjust their training programs for the job seekers coming through?
Yeah, I think partnering really with them, right? So we also work with some programs such as like Skills USA, which is specifically for the youth, and Skills USA uses that NCCR curriculum. So getting involved specifically with them to understand what that curriculum and the establishment is really a great way to be able to set that tone for the industry, like I had mentioned. So and setting that standard across the board, it's used very commonly with a lot of different organizations. So understanding what that curriculum and what that outline is, and then adapting to it and providing that curriculum at a base level, which I do know we've had some conversations with some organizations in New York City as well, in which they, like you had mentioned, they are specifically using that, but that's really going to set the tone for the workforce.
Justice, are there specific trainings, things that you think the providers, the audience today should invest in or be thinking about, or maybe should be more focused on right now?
Well, we do our own in training. Obviously, some pre-apprenticeship programs, allow the folks that are coming in to actually have a little insight about what is it of their trade or as a laborer, what to expect. And then as they get into our apprenticeship program, they will be trained 4,000 hours, working hours, 400 hours of training. So they will get that training. So what I say is, if, to the audience, if you come in through our apprenticeship program, you're going to be trained, you're going to be a skilled laborer, you're going to learn, a work ethic, you're going to learn things that, right, Erik, to keep you working. So, and, we work with certified pre-apprenticeship programs, and we work with communities so they can reach out to our training fund. We foster relationships with some social organizations that have a vested interest in the community, because we're not only that our movement is our organization is a workforce organization, but we involve heavily on the social justice front. We are concerned with the community that we work in. So we are able to accommodate our signatory contractors when a said project is taking place in the community, and the community only want, the community hire requirements, such as whether it's Section 3 requirement on the NYCETC project, whether it's, they only want certain zip codes for folks to come from, laborers to come from this zip code. We accommodate, and we pride ourselves with being on the front line for that.
Yeah, and Erik, anything on your end to add to that?
So,
Yeah.
so it's interesting, and again, I do apologize about the skill set. Sometimes I have to be reminded of that, and thank you very much for reminding me, Justice. Without your local 79 laborers, my company would be in a lot of trouble. So, to that end, again, since we don't hire directly, we really push that down onto the trades themselves. And what I have found, especially being a developer, construction manager, kind of wearing both hats here, when you start a project in a neighborhood, the neighborhood wants to know what's in it for them. One of the projects I'm working on right now up at 100 Claremont in the Columbia area, the Columbia University area, the surrounding neighborhood, since we are building on a site that was traditionally a Union Theological Seminary site, which was a not-for-profit, didn't pay taxes, but benefited tremendously from the growth and the expansion of the neighborhood. The neighbors wanted to know what's in it for them. And one of the things that they really pushed on us is diversity. And because we had Local 79 as a signatory to Local 79, and that we employed, 8, 9, 10 laborers at any one time, they appreciated that, and they knew that, which was, I was shocked that they understood that the diversity of a union, laborers union, but that helped us tremendously. So what I will say is, it's a partnership. It's a partnership with the local trade unions, and it's a partnership with the subcontractors that we hire to give back to the neighborhoods. So that's very important.
Okay, well, I think that really hits it. We're going to extend the panel a little bit longer, about 10 more minutes, just because we ran a little bit over. But had a couple big picture questions, and anybody can feel free to jump in and take this one. James had alluded to this a little bit, but with New York State, New York City is going to be receiving a reasonable amount of infrastructure funding, and I know that construction has lagged a little bit in the city and state, but from our perspective, things have really picked up last year. Things are building into this year too. I'm curious to get any of your takes on from a very big picture level, what kind of good public policy or local government support can lead to some real growth in the sector over the next few years. Anybody want to take that one first?
I'll jump on this one, Dave. I was thinking about this one too, but I really feel like, from a government or local policy perspective, just by ensuring that vocational training is supported within the local school systems, and providing adequate budgets with qualified educators who not only hold the skill, but properly advocate for the trades as a true career opportunity and not just as a plan B. I feel like that would be a great asset to be able to support in this arena.
Yeah, Justice or Erik, any thoughts on that?
I'm just going to jump on that a little bit and repeat what Desiree said. The vocational skills, unfortunately, in many of the high schools today, the vocational skills are not taught. And that has led to a tremendous gap. We talked about the aging out of a lot of these, a lot of workers that traditionally occupied these seats. And it's a little worrisome that there are no young folks coming up through the ranks to take those spots. So I 100% agree with Desiree's comment about vocational skills into the high schools.
Yeah, I concur personally. And, real entry standards, though, there's, for us internally, they have a lot of standards for folks that are actually integrated into the construction field. Something most notably is the body shop bill that we believe will help growth, and specifically with our union, for workers, protecting workers, right? Workers having more rights of not being exploited. The reentry work for the formerly incarcerated people that are coming out that are actually being, taken advantage of. So just regulations for folks that have been able to operate in the shadow without any accountability, more transparency. And, a wage would be nice too. A real wage, a standard wage would be nice for the industry.
I think it was another thing that James had highlighted in his presentation, and just curious to get each of your takes on this too. It's the increasing female participation on construction sites. I think he'd mentioned it hovered around 8 or 9%. I mean, it's even for our program, that's typically where it is. And I throw this out to the three of you again. It's, what are employers doing, or what can they do to kind of start to bridge that gap to increase female participation in construction? And again, to our audience, like, how can our audience, work with employers to help bridge this gap to get more participation?
I'll take the lead on that. So what we do, working with employers, developers closely, they have some requirements about how they would like their job sites to look, right? A lot of diversity components that's attached to that. And we happy to, as Local 79, to accommodate where there's, I've seen things from 10% of hours worked for women on a construction site hired out of this said zip code with a reentry component. Internally, what we're doing, like I said earlier, our apprenticeship recruitment is hovering over 15% of women that we are actually recruiting. And we are continuing to partner with, a plethora of organizations, but, new non-traditional employment for women, where a lot of women are coming into the construction field, coming from. And we just continuing to do that outreach. But our leadership also reflects that too, as well. We have a leadership of women leaders in various different leadership roles internally that actually represent and women that came out of the field that also exhibit that those possibilities is endless in the construction field. But just, you could continue to market that, you could continue to highlight. We just had a women's event where we elevated our women in construction. We do that every March, every Women's Month, and just making it attractive and knowing that women have a place here and protecting them and showing that, listen, there's a brother sisterhood here, that this is a place for women. This is a place for all people can be. So what employers can do is continue to, continue to do outreach, continue to make it attractive so women can know and feel that they have a place in construction.
I definitely appreciate that comment, Justice. I was thinking too, not just on making them aware of career opportunities, because unless you were exposed to it in the youth or had a family friend or that you would know about construction, but once we have women in our industry, really providing a great experience in order to make them to want to stay. So companies win by not what they do, but how they do it, and actions and behaviors directly drive what people experience. So ensuring that we're inclusive out on our job sites and that we change behaviors to want women to stay into the industry, I think is a really good big component of it.
The only thing I'm going to add to that is, as a construction manager, when we definitely promote the idea of increasing the percentage of women participants on the work site, we have to change the way our work sites are set up. Traditionally on construction sites, sanitary facilities, lunch facilities, or locker rooms were somewhat substandard, and it was just that's the kind of the way it's been done. Over the last 10 years, the Lendlease has put in a lot of requirements on all of our sites, which lead to higher participation from the up from the women to female side on sanitary and well-being areas. So that is definitely a challenge for us, but I think we are moving in the right direction. I think the industry is moving in the right direction on that.
Yeah, and one more question, that we'll turn it over to the audience for some questions. We touched on this a few times, but the idea of the next generation or young adults coming through CT schools. I know that we've got a youth build program in the audience as well. Any suggestions to those providers around how to best prepare young adults for the industry? Because I think we've all indicated this. There's going to be a lot of opportunity in all the different trades, and I think it's going to be a real growth opportunity for a lot of New York City residents.
We specifically partner with Skills USA, which is a nonprofit organization that's focused with middle school and high school vocational training and electives during school. So if there's any type of opportunities for them to be a part of that partnership, that was very much welcome. They have a very solid core curriculum that not only prepares them the students from a skill perspective, but then just also a job readiness perspective. So some of those skills that is encompassing, how do I work as a team, problem solving, those different aspects that are really critical to being successful in the workforce and really training the youth. So I would highly recommend any partnerships or collaborations with Skills USA as well. There may be some additional programs that would be beneficial as well, but the program really just allows us to develop and support the next generation, building that talent pipeline for the future. And additionally, it allows us to assist the teachers in developing their curriculum and further supporting them at a local level. And the more people that are more voices that we have in these respects, I think the powerful it will be and the more impactful that it will be.
I say, for the folks that's in the audience, reach out to, pre-apprenticeship programs that are affiliated with unions, that have relationships with unions. It's a great introduction to the youth that are coming up. You named a few when you started. So reach out to those organizations as well. Build a relationship with them, and then you can reach out directly to Local 79. We do, just past week, we had our folks from our executive board went out to a high school in the Bronx and did a career fair. We on the ground with that stuff to show, the young people that's still in high school that there's a pathway. I always think about these two twin brothers that's in my union now, and I remember that I met them at a career day in was the school on 96th Street, Co-op Tech, I believe, and they was unsure where they wanted to go, but they are having a successful middle class career right now and within Local 79. But I would say just continue to reach out to organizations, to unions, and see the ways that you can actually bridge or forge a relationship, as well as some pre-apprenticeship programs.
Okay, great. Well, I think, yeah, why don't we open it up to a couple questions from the audience. I think we'll be listing the names in the chat, if I'm not mistaken, and we're going to look to do this in order. So I think I've got one here. You'd be called up to ask a question. So I think the first question, if I'm not mistaken, this is coming from Andrea Fobbs, who's a work readiness instructor trainer with the HOPE program. So Andrea, want to ask your question? Do we have Andrea? Here she comes. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Andrea.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that. I clicked the wrong button.
No
thank you. This is very informative. And my concern is, like you said, how do we bridge the gap? I hear a lot of times from my students, how do I get this job on construction? They're earning all their certifications, but then when they want to apply for jobs, they may not have the experience, but they have all the certificates. So I really loved what what Desiree, what everyone shared, but the fact that Justin, what you shared was very important, because I think there is a fear of earning all their certifications and then going out there into the real world. And so when you talk about working in your community, how much language is out there to encourage people to come out of their comfort zone now that they have the tools, but they may not have the hands-on experience. How can we bridge those gaps? And then, like what Justin was saying, the apprenticeships are very important. And two, it just seems that sometimes it's like shrouded, where we don't know exactly, like where to really direct them, where it's not, it's not going around in a circle. So I just think the transparency, which, now we're seeing now, because we have so many different construction projects happening within the city, but at the same time, I feel like marginalized people are just learning. They only know one way of construction, and it's either construction or carpentry. And so we're giving them like, hey, it's environmental, oh, it's green infrastructure. So the fact that we're adding that into our curriculum is like, how do we bridge the gap as us being an organization of going out there and picking the right partners that we know for sure can guarantee our students employment. And I think not just employment, just a job, but be able to set their career. And then I feel like that's how they're able to design their future. So you kind of answered what I was asking for, but going forward, even as me as an instructor, I want to make sure that I provide all the tools that are necessary for each student to be successful going out into the real world.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, I know just even from our perspective of building skills, it's so different than it was 5 years ago. On the experience side, those certificates are extremely important, safety being the most important thing. But my experience has been employers are much more open to, again, go back to the young adults thing, who have, a little less experience, who really want to, get their foot in the door in the industry. So I do think there's more opportunity, and that's, again, go back to the aging workforce and a bit of a shortage in the labor market. But I do think there's a lot of opportunity right now. And I don't know if the panelists have, some things to add there too.
Yeah, I mean, we in the day and age, great comment, question. I wasn't sure, exactly what it was, but great insight. But what I will say is, we just no longer continue our where we come from, our background as a reason to not advance our course. There's a lot of information that's out there. People are doing the work. If you in this industry, whether what side of the aisle you end up on, people are doing the work to actually involve a lot of people that, a lot more folks that are really coming from marginalized background and disenfranchised people. We take pride in that ourselves as Local 79. And, I come from humble beginnings personally. So I take that, my organization takes that. And most of us in our organization, middle-class folks that are coming from, marginalized backgrounds. And I've worked closely with a lot of pre-apprenticeship programs and organizations that are actually doing the work to uplift, to advance, construction, for folks that are coming from dysfunctional or marginalized backgrounds. Excuse me, I misspoke, but marginalized backgrounds. So just continue to stay involved, continue to network. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of information that was given out today, and the relationships and the information is very important and useful.
It was a really nice comment to be able to bring up about what everybody can do to help, because it's so crucial. Like I mentioned before, as long as we have, the support and the voice of advocacy, that the trades are there. There was an interesting point that James had brought up during his presentation about the increase of non-trade occupations within our industry. And that's really the traditional route of higher education, college. And that, for decades, societies, including parents and education systems, have really been pushing college as the only option for the youth. So naturally, we see that cause and effect and that rise of non-trade share of construction versus the skilled trades. So partnerships with everybody, I think that's the most critical component. And I would be shocked if a contractor didn't want to partner with any of the organizations, because everybody is needed in order to make a difference.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As far as bridging the gap, it's organizations like David's that connect the trained workers with trades that are looking for workers. So that's, this is my first time that I'm really dealing with an organization like Building Skills, but I can definitely see that the trades are looking for qualified candidates, and it's just they don't have the resources to find them. So it's that connecting that which will bridge the gap. So
well, this has been great, everybody. We do have one more question. It's from Annie at NYCETC, and if I don't get a chance, I just really appreciate all three of you. You all took a lot of time with the prep on this, and I learned a lot just going through the process with you guys, and really appreciate it. Look forward to the day we can all do this in person someday, but I think this worked out pretty well. But thank you so much. Annie, I'll turn it over to you for one more question.
Thanks, Dave. James mentioned the kind of different laws that are coming into place, especially with the local law 97 around energy efficiency and gas upgrades. So wondering overall relative to that law, and also moving forward with a lot of efforts around energy efficiency, renewable energy, upgrades to the buildings, how you see that'll affect the sector as a whole, and particularly, of course, on the roles and particular skills that will be needed to make sure that people are ready to take on those kinds of, I guess the question is also whether is it a change entirely in roles, or is it change in particular skill sets, or a combination of both, and kind of how you'll see that impact in terms of over the next few years?
I can comment on that piece, on the renewable energy piece. So we developed a renewable energy division many years ago. So it is a unique skill set and role for sure. It's been a very positive division, and it has grown tremendously. And they will continue to grow because this is just the way of the future. And so that from a skill set perspective, there will be some tweaks to the skill set. There will be some specific needs on what you're installing. So I think that it would be an entirely different role from our perspective to date on working with renewable energy.
Well, thanks for that, Desiree. And it looks like we have one question from Anna. Anna, did you want to, we can bring you up to ask you a question around wages, and then we'll close it out there. Let's see. Just give us a second. The tech is a little glitchy. Hi, Anna.
Hi, everybody. So I just want to thank everybody for joining too. This is a really great and informative workshop that you're hosting right now. And this question is really coming out of, just an exchange that Justice had with Erik. And so it kind of had me reflecting, a lot of the students that I help with pre-employment services as a career specialist come with hard skills and transferable skills from previous work experience in their countries of origin, or from the training programs that they complete at LaGuardia Community College, and also from their home life. These are things that they pick up along the way, similar to what Desiree you were talking about. As you grow up, you kind of in your life, you have people that you learn from. And so I noticed that when I help them with their resumes and any pre-employment, job readiness trainings, they get hired as entry-level workers despite that previous experience. Sometimes I see them get hired with $15 to $17 an hour. And so my concern is, how can we have students that are qualified have access to this livable wage? And how do you all advocate for your employees and your people on the field to have wage increases? So thank you for, having me reflect in that moment. That's something that's always sat with me as a career specialist. So I want to hear how you all are seeing those skills, those hard skills that they have, even in that interview process, and how do you all advocate for them? Thank you.
Just answer that question. It's simply plain. It's a beautiful question, but it was sort of like a layup for me, right? It's like an easy shot, right? And union, right? If they become part of a union, when they become a part of a union, they will not have any poverty wage. They will have a wage that is a livable wage where they could have a middle class career, a middle class life, right? I'm not knocking anyone, but I'm just speaking about what the union assures. And I'm not saying that, no non-union folks can't pay, that wage, but I'm just speaking from traditionally, it's usually not. So what I will say is if you're going to be in construction, and again, this is my position, you have to, if you want to see them not have that $15 wage, the only way they're going to assure them that if they are become a part of a union, at least through my lenses, where they will have that security, where they will have that, they will get paid for their work that they put in, right? And everyone is paid equally. Your collective bargaining is there. And so what I would say, we just continue to protect our workers. Everybody have a collective bargaining agreement. We make sure that their medical is taking place. They have medical, they have, a pension, they have an annuity, they have that, most importantly, that wage where they could provide for their family and themselves. So my immediate response is, only way is, at least through my lenses, is the union wage. And there are a lot of contractors that are preying on, the vulnerable, the folks that are new to the field, that are being exploited and using that to their advantage to justify that poverty wage. I continue to stand against that. I continue to, be on the front line that stand against those wages that is happening out there. And again, in my humble opinion, no one that's doing construction should be making $15 an hour.
I'm just going to chime in there. I do agree with Justice. However, the idea that the only construction jobs that will pay a living wage would be union, I think that's a fallacy. And I hate to say that. Justice is going to come at me, but the idea is you have to prove yourself. And I know workers are coming to a new organization with a pre-skill set, but you have to prove yourself. And I think once you prove yourself, the employer is going to want to keep you. And how does he keep you? He pays you more. So I think there is the opportunity, even on the non-union side, to make a living wage. It's difficult in the beginning, but it's almost like, you got to prove yourself, and then there is that opportunity to move up. And the thing is, construction sites are open. They're open. There's a lot of people that pass through them, so that if you see, if a worker proves himself, it's not just that there's only the opportunity of their current employer. There's other employers walking that site that they can, see that potential and increase that wage if the entity that originally employs the person doesn't see that. So, there are two different ways.
I just want to make one comment behind Erik. And Erik, I just, I do agree with you in theory, right? But in actuality, like I alluded to, I said assure, right? And we know, I just want to express the verbiage there, right? The union assure that you will be paid more than that, right? I'm not saying that no other, entity or non-union sector can't pay. The question is, will they pay, right? So, but if you come into the union, you will have you won't even start out making $15 an hour. That's just will not happen. And the union will protect the fact that your wage will not be undercut for whatever reason. But I'm not saying no one is out there that's non-union that won't pay a livable wage?
I think the perspectives are very interesting, coming from a national perspective here, working in a lot of different environments. We work with a lot of different segments. And for us at Swinerton, career pathing is really important. No matter what role you play, we have a very intentional, as I mentioned, our craft services team before, and we want to retain our employees. And to Justice's point, you can't retain employees if you don't pay them. So fair wages is critical, but in all reality, there's going to be aspects of, no matter what industry you're in, of people that are going to take it. And I think it's just knowing what companies, what organizations to partner with that are going to set employees in the workforce up for success. So across the board, we're going to see it transpire, but it's to avoid those paths and really go down the correct path with the correct company and employer that is going to be paying those fair wages and offering them a true career.
Yeah, well said. I think time flew by. We're actually at time. So I think Annie was just going to wrap it up with a couple closing comments. Thank you again, panelists. I really, really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. To Desiree's final point, this is why all of our systems exist. This is why we are a robust coalition of both service providers and employer partners. You all got to us here today because you're all different flavors of high quality employers that are partnering with all of our members. And this is part of the kind of vetting process is partnership, both on the job seeker side and on the service side and the employer side. So we really appreciate all of you joining us today and showing the various perspectives, showing how complex the industry is. This has been a real learning process for us on the coalition side, as well as I know for engaging with all of you as panelists to both just learn the variety of nuance that goes into what the construction sector is, and what the different ways that people enter these roles and how who is an employer. There's so many different types of employers. So just really excited to continue to work with you all. There's been a lot of conversation in the chat about connecting with each of you. So this is certainly the beginning and not the end of this interaction, and making sure that both on the entry points and the retention, you all have access to the individuals that our members are working with and vice versa. So with that, thank you so much, Desiree, Justice, Erik, and David. We just, again, super appreciate your time. And that concludes the 4th installment in our Industry Needs by Sector series. Thank you to all of us that joined us this afternoon, especially how warm and lovely it was outside. And of course, thank you again to our panelists. Enjoy the rest of the day.